Okay, Joan's recording. And if, can y'all confirm that we're seeing the right screen?
Yes, you are.
And can Jeanette confirm that Zoom people can hear us? So I was letting people know in the room our audio is not working, so we're doing things a little bit differently tonight. And if Jeanette can let us know in chat maybe that Zoom folks can hear before.
People are saying everything sounds
Okay, so we're getting some signs. Everything's fine. Great. Thank you guys. Thanks for joining us on Zoom. Thanks for being here in person for our last meeting of the year, San Antonio chapter of the Native Plant Society. We always like to start off by welcoming any new members. Do we have any new members in the room? Doesn't look like it tonight. Returning members, maybe. I know I need to renew this in like 7 days. Mine expires, so I need to renew. If anybody's new online on Zoom, please feel free to let us know if you're comfortable with that. Thank you for being here. And I chose this photo for tonight on this because we've got the Monarchs moving through. So of course the presentation tonight is on milkweed. Monarchs rely on, but we've got the monarch migration going on right now. And this was taken along the Llano River this past weekend. They're feeding on some frostweed, which is one of our best fall nectar plants for monarchs. So we have some announcements to go through. We want to remind everybody we've got the fall symposium coming up on November 9th through 12th in Nacogdoches, Texas. There's still time to register, and there are both virtual options to register as well as in person. So if you're interested in that, please go to the state website and check it out. It's got all of the details of what the presentations are and everything else there. We want to thank all of our volunteers that helped us this past Saturday at our Pollinator Plant of the Year giveaway. And that was at Acequia Park down along the San Antonio River. And I want to thank all the volunteers that helped, but also a special thanks to Donald, who helped transport. I know he was here earlier. There he is. Helped transport 3 times these plants for us. And then Rocio, who translated all of our materials, I don't know where she is, she's here somewhere, hi, into Spanish for us, which was amazing. So we now have our bookmarks are in Spanish, and all of our materials for the giveaway. And also for everybody present tonight, we've got a bunch of these plants, and Teresa's indicating to me that with the number of people here, y'all can take away 3 plants when you leave, and they're outside on your way out, so that we didn't want to bring all the dirt inside here or soil inside here. So 3 plants on your way out. Don't forget those. Pollinator Plant of the Year. Butterfly Ranch had the vote on that. And we want to remind folks that we have these new chapter garden signs for sale. If you're interested, do we have some here with us tonight? The chapter garden signs? Not tonight.
Hand deliver it to your house. So
Haley will hand deliver. But anyways, you can get them online. And then coming up this Thursday, there's a really great event. It's a partner support here with the Greater Edwards Aquifer Authority. And it is the HEB presents Our Texas, Our Future. There's going to be some films that are shown, film screening. There will be a number of partner organizations. The San Antonio chapter is going to be there as one of those organizations. And so from 6:15 until 7, you can meet those nonprofits. From 7 until 8:15, there will be a variety of films that will be screening there. And it's at the Alamo College's District Support Operations location near Breckenridge Park. They're off of Broadway. So they're $5 per ticket, and you can get them at the Edwards Aquifer, Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance website. Shown at the bottom of the screen there. And we also have another partner to support here. This is an Alamo Area Master Naturalist Nature Program that is at the Gangani which means Garden of Children Preschool. It's not very far from the park here, and they recently lost their garden teacher, and so they're looking for anyone that's interested in helping them out. All you need to have is a love of gardening and helping kids, and the days, the hours, and the number of visits per week are flexible for this. And if you would like more information, you can reach out to Wendy Drezik. Her website is there, or her email is there at the bottom. And if you are like, yes, I want to do it, you can contact Rivki Block, who is the director here. And there's an email at the bottom of the screen and a phone number to reach out there. So it looks like a really great preschool program, and teaching all kinds of great things to children there. So save the date for our next chapter meeting, January 23rd, 2024. This is our last meeting of the year, so no meetings for 2 months. So be on the lookout for what that's going to be in our newsletter. And if you're on Zoom, this presentation qualifies for SAW's Water Saver Rewards points. And you can take a photo of that QR code to get to the quiz. There is a link at the bottom that will also take you to the quiz. There are 3 questions related to the presentation tonight that you have to answer after the meeting tonight in order to get your points. So you have to pay attention. I'll try to remember to pull this up at the end too, so the Zoom folks can look at it. If you're in the room and you're a SAWS person, you just need to sign the SAWS form that we have here. You do not need to take the quiz. And I'm so happy to be making the presentation tonight on the magic of milkweed. So while I transition and pull that presentation up, we've got some door prizes here that Haley's going to help give away.
All right, so our first door prize is this beautiful Phil Harbor Park photograph book. And the winner, the last 4 digits are 5861. All right. Hey, it pays them. Second door prize is a $20 gift card to Pollinators Nursery, compliments of Donald and Noni Gerber. All right, and that is 5822. All right. All right.
Okay, we got the giveaway. Are we ready to go here? Y'all ready to talk about the magic of milkweed? I'm so happy to be here. I mentioned the migrations underway, and so I'm gonna. Oh, on Zoom? Right. Okay, thank you. Let me try this again. So we're seeing it here. Go back to the screen share and see. Yeah, I need to. Oh, here we go. Let's see. Oh, here we go. There we go.
See it now? Yep.
Yeah, we got it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Haley. This is why we have multiple people. Thank you very much. Sometimes you think it's going great and it's not. And I don't know how to get rid of that off of for us in the room here.
Be a little short on that.
Click the line on the left and then you'll completely disappear. There you go.
And we just have that. Okay. All right. Awesome. So I am going to go over briefly just the migration itself. And then I'm going to talk about some of the common milkweeds that are in our area. These are the ones that are probably your best choices if you're choosing to bring milkweeds into your yard or your garden. I'm going to talk about some of the characteristics of milkweeds, and then I'm going to focus on this beauty here, antelope horns, which is my favorite, maybe milkweed. So this is a great map by the Xerxes Society. Some of you have probably seen this. We are in the Texas funnel. We are in an amazing location for the monarch migration for both spring and fall migration because they funnel through this area. And the monarchs that are moving through right now are the great-grandchildren of the monarchs that flew through here in the spring. And every time I think about this, it just blows my mind. This is one of the wildest things that's out there. We don't understand how this happens, but these are called the super generation, these monarchs. They travel the farthest, they live the longest of the generations, 2 generations in between. And so they are looking for food and energy so that they can keep flying to Mexico, where they're going to overwinter. They're going to hopefully make it through overwintering. And then when light conditions and temperatures change, they're going to get this impulse to fly back north. And they're going to come, and when they hit Texas, they're going to be looking for 2 things. They're going to be looking for nectar, energy, food, and they're going to be looking for milkweed so they can lay their eggs. And then once they lay their eggs, those butterflies are going to die. And hopefully those eggs they laid become caterpillars, and hopefully those caterpillars become chrysalises, and hopefully those chrysalises become adult butterflies. That's the next generation. They also have an impulse to go north, and so they go north and they're looking for milkweed and they're looking for nectar, and they start that process over again. They lay eggs, they die. There's another generation, same thing happens. They lay eggs, they die. And then those eggs, that 4th generation of the season, is that super generation. And they, for some reason, have this impulse to travel 3,000 miles south to overwinter in Mexico. And it's just crazy, right? That's who we're seeing right now, this super generation. So the best thing we can do for them in our area is to provide fall nectar plants. That's what they need. They need energy to keep going. And so there's a lot more to it, but I'm going to be focusing on some of the milkweeds, but this is an important part of it. In our area, the milkweeds are important in the spring for these monarchs so they can keep going. And so these images show an egg on the left, monarch egg on a milkweed. We've got a beautiful monarch caterpillar next, beautiful monarch chrysalis, and then the adult. So when they come in, they're looking for this milkweed. Native milkweeds are the best. These are some antelope horns, the one I'm going to be focusing on a little bit later. But when they lay their eggs, they sometimes lay a lot of eggs on very little plant material. Sometimes the plant can actually grow and keep growing as the caterpillars are eating the plant, but it's not always the case. Sometimes there's more eggs, there's not enough plant material for those caterpillars that start growing on the plants. You can see on the left how small that first instar of that caterpillar is. It's about the less than the size of a grain of rice. It's crazy. So these photos were taken in downtown San Antonio, where we had some antelope horns planted. So if you have some milkweed in your garden, your yard in the spring, what you want to look for are little tiny holes. Once you start seeing these little tiny holes on your leaves, start looking around and you might find little teeny tiny caterpillars. But you can see on the right, those caterpillars that you see are actually the ones that grew from all those eggs that were on that little tiny plant. They have devoured almost all of the plant, and they're pretty big. So they're about ready to turn into chrysalises, but sometimes they don't have enough material. And in fact, we've gone out and moved caterpillars to other milkweeds just so they could keep feeding on them. Okay, so milkweeds, from my experience in downtown San Antonio anyways, is that they do serve as a larval host plant in the fall, the native milkweeds, but it's not for the monarchs, strangely enough, even when the monarchs are flying through. Do y'all know who this butterfly is? Yes. Y'all are smart. So queen, very closely related to the monarch. They are in the same genus. They use the same larval host plants, milkweeds, but queens are breeding much longer in our area. And it's interesting to me that in the fall, even when the monarchs are moving through, sometimes our native milkweeds are up and growing, but they don't tend to use them because they're on their way to Mexico, right? But the queens do. So they can still be serving, and you'll hear later how these milkweeds will grow up and die back multiple times during the year, typically. So here's the difference between the monarch caterpillar and the queen caterpillar. They're both shown here on antelope horns in downtown San Antonio. The left photo is the monarch, and then the two photos on the right are the queen butterfly caterpillar. And the main difference is that the monarch caterpillar has two sets of appendages, one on its head and one on its rear. And then the queen, as you can see here, has three sets. So one on its head, one on its rear, and then there's one about a third of the way down. And even on this little teeny tiny one, you can see one set here, and one set there. So that's how you tell the difference. They don't always have, this queen looks a little bit different, has some reddish color. They don't always have that reddish color. And I've even seen monarchs that sometimes have a little bit of the reddish color. So the color is not really the best way to tell, but those appendages are always distinctive. But there are other caterpillars that feed on native milkweeds as well. These are just some that I've seen and been able to get good photos of. The ones on the right are really well known as feeders on milkweed, the milkweed tussock moth. But the other two, I don't know what they are. I have posted them on INAT, haven't got an ID yet. The ones on the left, there were so many of them, they actually ended up killing that milkweed plant, which is unusual. It doesn't usually happen with either the monarch caterpillars or the queens. Even if they eat the vegetation all the way down and there's nothing left, those plants still tend to come back. But for some reason, in this case, whatever these were, there were so many, maybe there were other stressors on that milkweed plant, but it ended up dying. And I don't know who this one is in the middle, but I'd love to find out. And then this is the only other critter that I've seen that's actually been able to kill the plants by feeding on them, not the adult form. So this is you can't see the top there, but it's called a milkweed leaf beetle. And it is a native beetle, but the larvae there can be a lot of larvae, and they actually can eat so much that they do kill the plant. So another really interesting thing that happens. If you get them on your plants, you don't necessarily have to do anything about them, but you definitely want to watch it just to see. And it's really about the total numbers of the larvae that end up on the plant. All right, we're very lucky that we have an amazing resource. It's called the Identification of Milkweeds in Texas. It is by Jason Singhurst and Ben Hutchins. And I have a copy here if anybody wants to take a look through it, but it shows all of the Texas milkweeds that are in the Asclepias species. So those are the most common plants that we know of as milkweeds. And there are a number of species, I forget the number, it's over 30. And this also has native and non-native that are in Texas, and great descriptions for them. You can find this online and download it for free. It's an amazing resource. So look into that if you're interested. And on the cover is Texas milkweed, Asclepias texana. This is a plant that is naturally grows mostly in the Edwards Plateau area, but it is sometimes available in the nursery trade. I've had one in my yard for about 5 years, and it's never flowered, but it's always come up and it's alive. So it's there. Other people have told me that it's done really, really well in their garden. So it's really beautiful when it's blooming, beautiful white blooms. It is a milkweed that likes the shade. So that's kind of unusual for a milkweed species, and Asclepias especially. But you can see here, we've got an American snout here. And then we also have some milkweed beetles on there. And I'm sure there's some oleander aphids. Oh yeah, you can see one right there.
Oh.
There's always, you'll see more, right? Aphids, they find it. So here's another one. This one is called butterfly weed usually, and it is Asclepias tuberosa. This is another one that is often available in the nurseries. In our area, this is not one that's usually used by the monarchs as a larval host plant, but it is an amazing nectar plant for a lot of other different species. And it's got a beautiful orange-red flower. You can see here, it's not the best picture, but there's a little butterfly here, one of the blues. They always turn the wrong way.
I think it's a Western pygmy.
Oh, okay, Western pygmy. So I'm glad I am not, I'm a not, yeah, okay. Okay, Western pygmy. Somebody that knows a lot more. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. I accidentally touched the screen. Okay, so this is another one. I really don't see this one much out in the wild, but I know that it is out. It's green milkweed. It's really a beautiful native milkweed, Asclepias viridis. And again, you can see here that it's supporting a little critter. This one is, what's that?
Oh, that's an early stage, that's not a.
Early, it's a nymph, yes,
Earliness.
of a milkweed bug. This one is sometimes available in the nursery trade. I actually just got a free one from the city of San Antonio at the Monarch Butterfly and Pollinator Festival. Thank you, City of San Antonio Horticulture Department. A lot of people were really happy. They had a number of different native milkweeds that they were giving away. So it's a beautiful one. And we have planted it down along the river and it does seem to do well. This one is really much more common in our area. In fact, I see it and others see it out along the roadsides, even growing through cracks in the sidewalk. This one doesn't need a whole lot of care. This is called Zyzotes milkweed, Asclepias onothyroides. And this is a photo of it. It doesn't always look this nice. It's got some really interesting elongated flowers compared to some of the other milkweeds. These are 3 different photos of it at different stages. I have one plant in my yard that's naturally occurring, and it usually, in fact, that's it in the middle. It usually looks like that. It doesn't flower very often, but it's not in the best conditions. This plant likes mostly sun, full sun, and it just happened to come up in my yard in a partly shade area. So it sometimes flowers, but mostly doesn't. It doesn't really get too tall, but I've seen it out growing along the side of the road, this tall, covered in flowers. So this one is sometimes available in the nursery trade, and it's probably one of the best choices for you if you're going to put one in your yard. There are also some milkweeds that are milkweed vines, and y'all should all recognize this one because it is on our chapter logo. I hope you recognize it. I just got this photo this past weekend. This is pearl milkweed vine. It's really common all around our area and pretty much all of our natural areas. There's a lot of it here in the park, but a lot of our areas, Matalea, although please forgive my pronunciations, the Latin pronunciations, reticulata. The flower is not that evident because it's green, but the leaves are pretty distinct. You can see them, and a lot of times with these vines, even if it's not flowering, you can tell it's a milkweed vine because of these aphids that usually will find any milkweed vine. But this is it. It's called pearl milkweed vine because the center is kind of iridescent like a pearl in the sun. It's really beautiful. Here's another one that's pretty common in our area, fringed twine vine, Phenastrum sinancoides. And usually it looks more like the flowers that you see on the right, the cream colored, lighter colored, but every now and then you see one that's like on the left, that's that beautiful mauve color. And you don't always see them in these really full clusters of flowers. Sometimes they're kind of scraggly and they only have a couple of different flowers on them, but this is a gorgeous native milkweed vine. It's a little bit weedy though, so it does really need a large area. It covers things. There's a lot of it out along the river right now, but it is a really great native milkweed vine. Here's another one that's pretty common around our area. It doesn't have such a beautiful flower as the last one. This one is Talayote. It is Synancum unifarium. And as you can see here, it's covered in the oleander aphids. And it's blooming. It's not very distinct. Again, the flowers are kind of green, so it doesn't really stand out like some of the others, but it's pretty common in our area. So let's talk a little bit about milkweed flower parts, pollination, and seeds. Many of the milkweeds, and Asclepias in particular, have really unique flowers. I won't go into too much detail. I'm not going to give you a test on the names of these things, but a lot of the parts of the flowers that we usually know of in these milkweeds are fused together. And so what is important or interesting to look at are the pollen. It's pollinia. And so it's pollen that's connected to a really sticky part called the corpusculum. And these are stuck in parts of the flower that are called the stigmatic slit here. So in this case, the pollinia has been removed. Here you can kind of see one, I hope. There's the sticky part, and then the pollinia are there. It's just waiting for something to come and like an insect to stick its leg on there for it to get stuck on there. And in the photo, you can see those stigmatic slits right here. But I'll show you what happens when typically it's going to be a larger insect that's going to come along. And these are the antelope horn flowers that I'm showing here. Smaller insects with little dainty legs are probably not going to be able to get these pollinia stuck on them. But here you can see this carpenter bee is covered. It's got pollinia on this leg, all over this leg, all over this leg. And then you might be able to see down here where this arrow is, there's one that's just ready for something to step on it so it gets stuck on it. And I was just reading a paper that talks about how many visits it takes an insect to then transfer that pollinia that's stuck on it. And it said it might take up to 1,000 visits before that pollinia gets removed. So just imagine how many plants have to be out there, how many insects have to be out there for these things to be pollinated. This image is taken from that resource I told you about, that identification of milkweeds in Texas by Jason Singhurst and Ben Hutchins, and it shows the seed pods. So the photo on the left shows them as they're forming, and then as they start to dehisce, they start opening up. Those seeds are ready, and when they're completely ready to go, it completely opens up. Each of the seeds has a little parachute of very fine hairs, and the wind will carry it away. Hopefully it will land somewhere that it can grow. So here we see a couple of seeds that have landed on a plant. These seeds are not going to grow here, but maybe it will rain. Those seeds will break off from that parachute of hair, and hopefully they drop down somewhere where they can touch the soil. So seeds really need to have contact with soil in order to grow. And so some of them do land in perfect places, others don't. So again, imagine how many seeds have to be out there for there to be enough that land that they can become plants. All right, so now we've reached the time to just focus in on antelope horns, which really is an amazing milkweed. It's a beautiful one. It's one of the most common ones. Oops, I wasn't going to show you that one yet. So when I first moved back to San Antonio, I saw these blooming in full bloom on the roadside, and I couldn't believe it. And they reminded me of popcorn balls. They are about the same size as popcorn balls, and they kind of look like it, right? And I just cannot get that out of my mind whenever I see them. This was one of the first things I ever made. A recipe I actually cooked by myself in the kitchen as a kid. So I guess, I don't know, there's something about it. Every time I see them, I think about those. They're called antelope horns because the seed pods apparently look like antelope horns. But I saw this one time in downtown San Antonio, a shadow, right? And I thought, well, maybe that's why it's called antelope horn. So I don't really know. Kind of cool though. So this is a pretty common one out in our area actually, and you don't normally see it until it's blooming. And then when they're in bloom and it's a good year, they're all over the roadsides, all over the place. And so they have a pretty wide distribution in the state. This is a really great one. This is probably the best choice for ornamental value and for the ecological value, if you can find some. It's Asclepias asperula. They grow to between 1 and 2 feet tall. This is a really full one. They don't always look like this. This one's in an ideal situation under ideal conditions. This was actually out in New Braunfels this past spring. It has many stems and many flowers. Sometimes they only have a few stems. Sometimes they don't flower. These plants will come up and grow up and die back multiple times in a growing season. They might flower multiple times in a growing season. Their bloom time is from March to October. So they usually have a lot greater blooms in the spring, and then maybe some sporadic blooming later if the conditions are right. So what I've seen watching them is they'll come up and they might bloom and then they'll die back. Maybe they've been eaten back by caterpillars. And then they might be dormant for a while until conditions are right. So in this extreme drought that we had, there wasn't a whole lot of activity this past year, but in previous years where we had more rain, I've had antelope horns grow up and die back 4 times in one growing season and flower twice during that growing season. So it just depends on the conditions. They really love full sun, and in our area, full sun is 6 hours of sun or more. So if it gets 6 hours, that's considered full sun. They do like dry to moist conditions, and most information out there says that they are highly deer resistant, but in my experience where I am, I have high deer pressure, and I learned that the deer were actually eating all my milkweed. And so I had to fence it off. Once I started putting little fences around my milkweed, they started growing. And so it was definitely the deer that were eating it. They do have toxins. Y'all are probably familiar with that, the cardenolides. They are cardiac, now I don't remember the name. Some of y'all know what it is, but they affect your heart. And so these can be a real problem for livestock like sheep and cattle. Just need to be careful. You don't want it around pets that might eat plants or kids that might eat plants, but just good to know. It's wild though. Yeah, the deer, I mean, you would think that deer would need it. I've also heard that rabbits, rodents will eat them. So let's just now go through some of the different species of wildlife that have connections with this milkweed, this antelope horn. This is that same carpenter bee that I showed you earlier. It's definitely a pollinator of the antelope horns and probably some other milkweeds. You can see here, this is a side profile. So not only are there pollinia stuck on the legs, but all over the abdomen here too. And this photo is one of my favorite insects, the tarantula hawk wasp. This is also a pollinator of antelope horns. This photo is not of antelope horns. This is actually a Zyzodes, but you can see it's a good one because you can see all the pollinia stuck all over the legs of the tarantula hawk wasp. So it really does take kind of larger insects. So bumblebees I've seen do it, and wasps, and some of the larger carpenter bees especially, and honeybees as well. Okay, so we did talk about the oleander aphids. These are actually introduced species, but somehow, I mean, they're everywhere. If there's a milkweed, they find it, no matter what. They typically don't cause a lot of damage to the plants. They're more of an aesthetic. They really look unattractive because sometimes they'll just be coating it. The infestations can be high. But if you are going to take action to try to remove some of them, like spraying it with a hose is a really good way to do it without using chemicals. You want to be sure and look really closely, because this little guy is called an aphid eater. and it's a native insect. It's actually the larval form of this beautiful hoverfly. And you can see over here how tiny it is next to the finger here. And it blends in really, really well. So you have to look really closely, because if you see these colors and you remember what those antelope horns flowers look like, these are the same exact colors of the flower too. They just blend right in, and they're not very big, but you can see in this one, it's about to get this aphid and suck all the juice out and then move on to another one. So you want to let these guys live so that you can have these beautiful adult hoverflies that are pollinators of some of our other native plants. So another insect that you'll probably see on your milkweed is called a milkweed bug. And these are true bugs, and that is actually in reference to their mouth parts, called true bugs. These will also cause a little bit of damage, like the aphids. They will use their mouth parts and pierce into the flowers, into the stems, into the leaves, into the seeds of the milkweeds. But again, they don't typically kill the plants. They don't cause a lot of damage. They might cause a little bit of damage, but you usually don't have to take any measures to manage them. They are a connected part of milkweed, and they rely on milkweed. Juniper hair streaks are often seen on antelope horns. I wished I could find a photo. I know I took years ago, and I've seen it here and there. Sometimes these antelope horns will be just covered with juniper hair streaks, and it's a beautiful sight. Here's a juniper hair streak that's not quite as vibrant. It might be the angle of the light, but it's with some friends here. And the friends are not all in focus, but you might be able to see here, there's a honeybee here, another honeybee here. There's a beetle right here, another beetle right here. There's probably some oleander aphids in there somewhere. And then there's another little guy here. And this was, again, at those, that antelope horns I saw in New Braunfels in the spring. And I came upon it, and it was just teeming with life, just everything moving around. And it's not really easy to get good photos of insects when they're all moving around like crazy. And sometimes when you go to these milkweeds, they will be like that. They will be covered. There will be just so many things on them that you can't believe it. And other times that same milkweed plant, you maybe won't see anything on it. It's just you got to keep going out and looking, and eventually you'll start seeing all of the ways that it's benefiting the ecosystem. Here's another little critter, probably is a pollinator, could probably pick out some of that pollinia. Texas soldier beetle. Here's just a regular old fly. I know Alicia will like that one. Here's some cuter flies. These are called dance flies. And we've got one here and one here. They look like they have little leg warmers on. Really cute. Probably not pollinators of the plant, but they're enjoying the plant. Lacewing larva. So this lacewing larva is probably after oleander aphids, or maybe some other aphids. Usually, or very often, these will have debris all stuck all on them. They're called junk bugs because they attach all kinds of litter and different things on top of them. And so they look like a little piece of debris moving around. This one doesn't have any of that yet. I rarely see them like this, but when you see those little guys, look close, because you underneath all that junk is one of these little critters, and they become beautiful green lacewing bugs that many people are familiar with as beneficial insects in the garden.
That junk that's on them, it's things they eat. It's like skeletons and carcasses of other little insects.
That's a good point. I was
Close focus.
so I was reluctant to mention that, but since it was mentioned, sometimes, very often, they will stick carcasses of the things they've eaten on their backs. And so some of the junk that they're carrying around is the bodies of the things that they ate. And crab spiders. I'm a big fan of spiders. And so do y'all see it there? It's not too hidden because it's sort of off, but you can see how it blends in really well. These crab spiders, they can blend in with all kinds of plants, but definitely on these antelope horns, I see them very often. There's one there and you really have to look hard to find it. And a lot of times they hide because they see you and so they go underneath it, right? So they're hard to photograph, but this guy, you can see the colors really match all the greens. And if you look at the arms, very often they'll even mimic the angles of the flowers.
Wow.
Here's another one just with the flowers dying back. It's done its thing. Most of the flowers are dying back, but here it is right here. And you can see, again, it just matches perfectly. And the abdomen really actually looks just like part of a flower. Got a little ant over here. Here's another one. This one happens to be a little bit yellower in color. And you can see this crab spider is also a little bit more yellow. It's just waiting. We've got another beetle here, another beetle here. So a lot of times it's just kind of looking in really closely. Oh, and this is my favorite thing that I've found so far. What is it?
Jumping spider.
Jumping spider? It really looks like a jumping spider, right?
It's not.
It's not. Just look at that though, because right, it does look like a jumping spider peeking through. But look, this is actually the head of this critter, and this is its wing.
And a weevil?
It is a moth. It's a tiny moth. And so this photo on the right is actually from iNaturalist, and Ben Hutchins took this photo. You can see how this would look like the spider with the eyes and the arms, right? And so I didn't even know this creature existed until I saw the moth on the milkweed flower, and I started trying to take photos, and then I suddenly saw what it looked like a spider, and I just kept trying to get photos, and most of them were blurry because these things are tiny. But here it is. This is that same one. And even at other angles, you can kind of see how this could look like a spider too with the legs. They hold their wings out certain ways and it looks like a jumping spider. And if you look into these moths, there's multiple species that do this. And there's at least one, and there's some videos online where it even moves like a jumping spider very sporadically and quickly, just like a jumping spider, and holds its wings out. And you would definitely think that that's what it was because they're small. So pretty cool disguise. My favorite thing I've found so far.
So do you normally see them on sedge because it's a sedge moth?
I don't know. So there's a question in the room about whether you normally see them on sedges. I guess you probably would. I guess I need to look into it more. I'm just amazed at how they look like jumping spiders, but I would guess so, that usually a common name has some meaning. So I would think probably that's where they're found, but I really don't know. I just saw one down along the Llano River, same type of moth. It was on a upright prairie coneflower, and I didn't get any good photos of it. They were all blurry. But here it is again, just to show you how it blends in with the flower. So I have a blow up of it, but it's right there. And so here's the blow up. You can see it, but look how much it just blends right in with that flower. Okay, so if you are thinking about getting some milkweeds in your garden, please consider using local or regional natives. They are your best choice because they support so many of our local native fauna. And always look at what that milkweed needs in terms of conditions. So light conditions, moisture conditions, maybe the type of soil that they prefer. So what habitat is that milkweed normally found in? And do you have that habitat on your site? Do you have those conditions in your yard or where you want to put it? So match the milkweed to your site. Mark them well. I use little decorative garden stakes, because a lot of the time during the year, there's nothing there. They are underground, they're dormant, even in the growing season. And so if you don't have some sort of a marker, it's easy to forget where they were. If you have heavy deer pressure, think about protecting it, maybe putting a little fence around it. Be patient with your milkweeds. Don't expect more of them than they can give. They pretty much just do their own thing. Look closely at them, watch them. You'll probably be really surprised at all of the life that they attract, especially when they're blooming. But very often, even when they're not blooming, you can find all kinds of stuff on there if you just take a little time to look and enjoy the magic. So thank you very much. And I don't even know what time. Okay. And I'm happy to take questions, but it looks like Joan might have a question.
I do.
Okay.
I would like you to elaborate a little more on being patient. Putting the milkweed, and it's gonna just put so much energy for years in its root mass before it ever shows up, which is why also the marking it is so important. But anyway, you might want to.
So Joan asked me to elaborate on the patience part with milkweed because it's true. Sometimes milkweed does take, and other plants too, they put a lot of their energy in their root systems. And it really just depends on the conditions of the environment that they're in. But it might be years before that milkweed blooms. And I have heard story after story after story of people who put milkweeds in one year and they thought they all died and they ripped everything out and replaced it right away. And it's hard to say whether those plants were really dead or not, but very often it was probably the case that they were not dead at all. They just went dormant. They just got a little stressed out, but they were still alive and they needed just some time. So that's why, again, it's important to mark those locations where you plant them so you can remember that there's something there, you can monitor it. And I think that if you did that, you'd be really surprised at how resilient that they actually are. Did you have a question?
The last 2 or 3 or 4 milkweeds that you showed were not in the Asclepias.
Asclepias? Mm-hmm.
They were something else, like the pearl, the vine pearl. Are those also hosts for monarchs?
So the question was about those species. I'm just going to go back that were not Asclepias or Asclepias. These are what are called milkweed vines. And so there's 3, oops, what did I do? Oh, sorry. I went one too far. Okay. So the pearl milkweed vine is the genus Matilea, however you want to say it. The French twine vine is Finastrum, and there are other species of Finastrum and Matilea. And this is Talayote. This one is the genus Synancum. There are other species of Synancum. So these are the milkweed vines. They do not tend to be used as a larval host plant by monarchs. So the Asclepias ones, many of those are. And in our area, the research has shown the preferred native milkweeds that are preferred by monarchs for their eggs are Zyzotes, antelope horns, and green milkweed. So those 3 are really your best bets. But again, looking out what occurs naturally in the landscape without a bunch of care, antelope horns and Zyzotes really in this area, immediate area, are probably your best bets for milkweed choices. If you've got those conditions, so they all like pretty much full sun. And if you do find some available and you plant them, any new plant that you put in is going to take a little bit of care initially. So it needs a little bit of care to establish because they've been grown under some really caring conditions, and you're going to stick them out in the harsh environment and they're going to need a little bit of love at first. But goes back to being patient. Don't give up on them is the main point about that. But yes, there are a lot of other plants that are in the milkweed family.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There's a question right there.
Something diverse features in these. What are the commonalities other than that they're eaten by butterflies. larvae.
So what are the commonalities? Right, so
Milkweed.
the set, yeah, so it would be the toxins. And they don't all have the cardenolides. There is another type of toxin that is found in some, but offhand I don't remember. But most of them have this toxic trait, and so they're not eaten by some things, obviously. Other organisms benefit from that fact. The monarch is one of them. The queen, the ones that do feed on it, actually get toxic properties themselves because of feeding on that. And so that is a commonality among these milkweeds. There's probably more taxonomic commonalities that are I just don't know that other people know, but that's the main one.
I just was gonna say, they all have the sap that's milky.
Mhm.
And, you know, it must have a lot of, you know, some kind of nutrition for all those insects. I mean, it's just, it attracts every.
Perhaps you're right. A lot of things don't just feed. So a lot of organisms feed on the nectar. But many others, like the milkweed bug I showed, the aphids, and the caterpillars obviously feed on the plant material and the latexy sap that has the cardenolides. So yes, there must be a lot of benefits for many different critters in these milkweed plants. Are there any other questions from?
Yeah, there are a couple. First one is, where can we buy the Texan milkweed?
Ooh, where can you buy Texan milkweed? What's that? You just have to, it is one that's sometimes available. You just have to look around, and I mean, they're not going to be available all the time, but did you know about Texas milkweed, or you have another question?
But that leads to the question, how can you propagate it, and how do you propagate it?
I do not propagate plants. So the question is, why can't you propagate them, and how do you propagate them? Milkweeds in general can be tricky to propagate, but mostly it's because they need the standard methods of propagation involve high nutrient soils, and many native plants, milkweeds included, actually get stressed out by a lot of extra nitrogen and high nutrient soils. And the other thing about milkweeds and many other prairie plants in propagating, standard practices are using short containers for growing them. Many of these prairie plants, including milkweeds, actually need cone containers that are long and narrow, because they spend a lot of their energy developing deep root systems. So there are just methods that are not common for propagating, but they can be propagated. And a great resource that gives some information on specific milkweeds and propagation of specific milkweeds is the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center plant database online. It's a University of Texas online database. And under the plants themselves, very often they will have a section about propagation. Some of these milkweeds need certain periods of time at colder temperatures, like other plants do too. Some of these plants might need what's called scarification or roughing up of the seeds, like other plants do, for them to germinate. So that'd be a good resource to look into. But as far as Texas milkweeds and their availability, you just call around. And there's like 10 hands up all of a sudden. Thank you. Okay.
Gardens of the Butterfly Landing. She has a area at Rainbow Gardens on Bandera. She also propagates it.
So for the folks on Zoom, 2 locations that currently have Texas milkweed are the Nectar Bar, and that's on Bulverde Road, and Laura Jarvis at the Rainbow Gardens on Bulverde Road, Bandera Road, sorry.
And the natives of Texas nursery up in Kerrville, usually that's where I've gotten mine.
So possibly natives of Texas nursery in Kerrville might have them. Okay.
So I planted some milkweed last October. I got one plant to come up. Any of those other locations, they have a chance of coming up next spring.
So you planted, how many did you say?
4 or 5 locations.
Four?
Seeds.
Oh, so they were seeds, 4 or 5 locations of seeds of milkweed. And what were planted and what species were they?
Antelope horns.
Antelope
I got
horns.
one that came up.
One plant came up.
Now the other locations, do those seeds have a chance?
I would not give up. So the question is so only 1 out of 5 locations where antelope horn seeds were planted resulted in a plant that came up and visible this year. They were planted October of 2022. And is it still possible that the others will come up? And yes, it's definitely possible. I don't know specifics about milkweed or antelope horn seed viability, but many plants, those seeds are viable for multiple years in the soil. So I would definitely not give up on them. Yeah.
Yeah, the Bernie chapter did a project promoting this. They basically mixed perlite and refrigerated it. And you get great production. So you just have to learn how it's the overwintering was required. They put a perlite mix in there, put it in the refrigerator, you spread it out on the thing, they got great germination. So it can be done. And also Sherry Hess did really well with the Texas milk. Remember she had many of those she brought on the sale. So I think that's probably the white Texas milkweed probably is pretty easier of the ones to actually just directly without a lot of manipulation. But so there are methodologies out there to get a very good
So just to
germination.
repeat for the Zoom folks, in case they didn't hear it, there are methodologies out there that you can find on propagating milkweeds, including the Texas milkweed, which because it is one of the ones that's available in the nursery, it is probably a little easier than some of the others to grow, but it might have something to do with the cold stratification, the period of days that and cold temperatures that they're held at, which many seeds require. Yes.
John Kirchhoff shared with me, because he had some success, he plants his seeds as soon as he picks them.
I didn't hear that.
He plants the seeds as soon as he picks them in the field. He doesn't let them get dry or put away in an envelope. He picks them and he plants them. He's had success.
So there's a comment that Don Kirchhoff, who has Kirchhoff Family Farm, is that what it's called? Prairie. Thank you. It's a great prairie restoration project. Lots of volunteer opportunities for folks, but he plants the milkweed seeds as soon as they drop. And that's an excellent point, because that is the best time to plant any seed. When the plant is naturally dropping the seed in the area, that is the best time to sow those seeds. You don't always have that luxury. And so sometimes when you are planting seeds, you are putting them out. If you're planting a mixture of seeds, fall is a great time. Fall is a great time to plant plants too, but it's a great time to plant seeds. And it's because they do get that, you want to get them touching the soil, and they do get whatever winter impacts there are. If it's a temperature thing, they might experience just what they need. If it's getting roughened up a little bit, they might experience that through the winter and come up. It just really depends, but the best time always is when the plant is dropping that seed in your area. Yeah. Got a question from Zoom?
Yeah. One of them was just in general, are milkweeds hard to transplant? And then someone asked specifically about antelope horns.
So
Is it
yes.
better to dig out the whole plant and wait for it to seed?
So transplanting milkweeds and antelope horns, yes. So pretty much the consensus is it's very difficult to transplant milkweeds. They very often will have, it's not so much a really large underground tuber, but they don't like being moved, is what it seems like. And so if you don't have to move your milkweed, don't do it. If it's doing fine where it is, you just don't like the way it looks, or it's more of an aesthetic versus an ecological decision, you're better off just leaving it. If it's doing well, it's telling you this is where I need to be. But if you have to move it, I think the best advice would be to get as much of the surrounding soil as possible. Try to take all of the plant and as much of the surrounding soil that you can get and keep it intact. When you move it, and move it into conditions that are as close to where you're taking them from as possible. But most people say they don't like to be moved. And we did have to move some milkweeds. In fact, some of the antelope horns I showed you, because of a construction project, and none of them survived. Or, well, yeah, I don't think they're coming back, because it's been a while now, but I think it's just because they do not like to be moved. Where are we at? It's 8:01. Any more questions? Or are we all ready to go?
There was one more on the bill. Did you want to get, Patty Garcia's?
Oh, yes, she said she bought parsley plants from a nursery that had monarch caterpillars on it. Tried putting them on a milkweed plant with shallow water dish in an enclosure, and they all died. Do you know why this might have happened?
So the question was that someone bought a parsley plant with monarch caterpillars at a nursery, and they moved the caterpillars into a milkweed with water in an enclosure, and they all died. So parsley, it probably was a swallowtail is my guess. There are swallowtail caterpillars that look very similar to monarch caterpillars, but they tend to be more green, yellow, and white with maybe some spotting on them. But swallowtails are notorious for feeding on parsley and dill. And my guess is that it probably was a swallowtail caterpillar. And it's okay to make that mistake. It happens, but that's probably what happened. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you guys so much. And I'm going to put that QR code back up if I can find it. So Zoom people can get it if they need it, but I don't know if I can find it.
Did you want to do this?
Oh yeah, turn that around. Can you see where it is?
No. I have no idea where it is. It's out there somewhere.
I can get the camera back. I can't see it.